Okay. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 12 of the SFC Record Club vlog. And today we are welcoming a very special guest, Natasha. Thank you for joining us.
Hey,
Oh no, are you frozen? Oh, there you are. Hey.
we're back. We're back.
All right. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing really good. Excited to be joining the little podcast that we have.
hmm And it's April 1st, but it's cold and rainy. So, yeah.
A cruel joke.
Yeah. And I could see the cherry blossoms, but they're all wet and
Yeah,
mm.
I feel like this happens every cherry blossom season.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So first on the agenda, I wanted to ask you about your experience with SFC Record Club.
Hmm.
What is it? And yeah.
Right, so SFC Record Club is I think kind of like it's not really an extracurricular because I think you can join it whenever you want. You
hmm
can come in and out of it, but it really is just like kind of a spot to hang out and genuinely listen to music. I think people who really love music and also people who want to communicate through music. So we have a lot of Japanese students who want to practice their English come in as well. It's a great place to make friends, and it's a great place to really, I guess, like be nerdy about like your personal interests in whatever genre that you enjoy. Yeah.
Hmm. And in your case, I think the first time you came is so we had already agreed that you were going to be an SA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hadn't gone as like just an attendee, but I had kind of joined to kind of help out, which I'm actually really happy about, um, because it's kind of like learning on the job, which I really enjoyed.
hmm
Um, and yeah, but to be honest, being a student assistant and being attendee, I don't think there's too much of a difference besides like maybe putting stuff up on the wall. But even the attendees come and help out putting stuff on the wall. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I think it feels nice because you're getting together and doing stuff with students that doesn't have anything to do with school.
Mm.
Like, re I mean, it does have some, like, we talk about school, obviously, because that's, like our most common interest. But, like, out of that, you really get to know people on a bit more of a personal level, which I
Mm.
think is great.
hmm So somehow in your case, I had the idea that I had to, yeah, offer you the SA position to get you to come.
Right.
You,
Well,
you were too cool to come on your own. Yeah.
um, yeah, uh I think in terms of my schedule, the semester um I took your writing classes.
hmm
Um I it just so happened that I had classes on the times that like record club was on. Um so it just made more sense for me to have it fitted in schedule because
hmm
then I usually like if it isn't, then I make plans over it and whatnot. So
hmm
yeah, it was a good position to be in to like be introduced to record club for me.
Well, see, I knew you'd like it and I knew you'd be good at it, right? Just because I saw how you acted in the creative writing class and the indie
Mm.
rock class. I'm like,
Hmm.
hmm. And I
Yeah,
and I was right, right?
yeah, yeah. I had tons of fun in record club.
Hmm. So let me ask, do you think, so why are these kind of spaces, like a space where students could just drop in casually and hang out, mingle? Like why do you think those kind of spaces are necessary on university campuses?
Actually, I think that's a great question. I think in the advent of like of kind of social media, but also the comeuppance of like uh these more like premium places or areas. So places that you have to pay to get into to hang out in. There's been a decrease of third third spaces
Hmm.
where people can hang out for free. Um, and we have, I think a lot of people talk about a loneliness epidemic. And I think it's partly because there aren't places where young people can hang out and talk to each other and, for free, because I think that making spaces that only few people can afford um, doesn't promote accessibility. And so having a space to ourselves where we can talk to one another and discuss or just, gossip is really, really important, I think. And there are other lounging areas in SFC, but it's not like you can play loud music with everyone. It's not an open space where everybody's like encouraged to talk to one another.
Mm.
They're usually very personal. And so usually like if you're going to one of those lounging spaces, you're going to with a group of friends that you already know.
Hmm.
And you're going to either study or maybe eat something from the konbini. And so, and it can get quite like loud there. I don't always like being in those spaces because I think that like in a way because those lounging spaces are a place made for everyone. Um, it means that like there are certain standards of etiquette that other people have that like then don't translate towards like other individuals. So like, like because it's a co-working space, like I would kind of expect it to be a bit more quiet.
Hmm.
But then when it gets loud, I'm like, oh, like this place is, I think, like built for like, like taking classes online, doing, like schoolwork
Mm.
at school. And yeah, so I think that record club is really nice in that like you're encouraged to be loud, you're encouraged to like talk to strangers that you've never talked to before and like really introduce yourself. Which I really enjoy. I don't always like I mean personally like um I don't always love meeting new people.
Mm.
Um, Not that I'm shy. Oh, this is gonna sound like so this is gonna sound so entitled, but like or something, but like
Mm.
I think I already really love the community that I have in SFC.
Hmm.
Um, and of course I like am willing to and enjoy meeting interesting new people, but um I don't find it as necessary anymore to like really get to know like a brand new person
Mm.
because I think yeah, recently I've been realizing that I want to invest in more of my like genuine friendships that I've already built. So,
Hmm.
but still, like I think for particularly for like first and second years, it's a really great space to make new friends.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that's an important time that to meet people, I think, in
Yeah.
your first or second year, right? Um, so part of like my thinking about like I think it's such a waste for like so many people to get together on campus and then like go to the class and then everybody go home. Like everybody go their separate ways. Like you don't even talk to each other much outside of class in some cases. So I think yeah, I think it's good. Like even, if it's even if you just stop in for 10 or 15 minutes, it could brighten up your day.
Yeah.
Hmm. What do you think of using records, right? As opposed to streaming and well, how do you usually listen to music?
Yeah, I usually stream. Like
Hmm.
that's when I was younger, I used to use like YouTube a lot. And I think that it's I didn't quite understand why what was the hype around like records initially. Um just because there is kind of a barrier of entry with
Hmm.
records. You have to have the money to buy records. You have to have the money to buy a record like player.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of associated it with like pretentious, like music fanatics.
Hmm.
Um, and like, yeah, in my high school, there was a guy who like, and we like my high school was a very, very international place. And so everybody would travel from like, all across the world. And there was this guy from Kenya who decided to bring his own record player. And and then he like, I remember sitting in his room once and he was like, "Do you know this Japanese artist? Like he's so good, like, but he's super unknown." And he pulled out a Nujabes record and I
Hmm.
was like, "Oh, you like go away." Um so I really heavily associated it with like kind of that experience. Um, Not that I thought that like Record Club was going to be a bunch of those guys or anything like that, but I thought it was t more catered towards people who were technically inclined with music.
Hmm.
Um, but joining, I've realized that actually like to re-experience an album that you like
Hmm.
um with a record is wow, like it's phenomenal. I think like there are a lot of albums that I listen to for the first time on record. And so I'll remember them the way I remember them off like on the record player.
Hmm.
But like I think it's a incredible experience to love an album like I did with Malibu
Hmm.
and then to like experience that on a record. It's like, oh, this sounds like so much more refined than it does on streaming.
Hmm.
I don't know how to explain it
Hmm.
because obviously I'm not like I don't know like the technical stuff about making music and making records and whatnot, but
Hmm.
there is something that like I think we've missed out on a lot. I think my generation because we don't buy records anymore or like listen to music and like via like analog ways.
Hmm.
Um and so yeah, like I'm actually really grateful to have like experienced music in this way. It kind of changes my perspective on things a lot.
So some students have described it as I think what you were kind of what you were just talking about how it sounds different from streaming. When you hear it on vinyl, it sounds 3D. They've described it as
Mm,
right.
mm,
Ex
mm,
you're experiencing the song in 3D, which is
mm.
yeah, that's kind of a hard concept to understand unless you've experienced it. But
Yeah,
yeah. Hmm. Hmm. All right. Well, thank you for saying so. All right.
yeah.
Um, let's see. Do you have any specific memories of your experiences at Record Club that you would like to share?
Not really. There's not one moment where I was like, yeah, but that's what's good about it is that like it's a very low stakes kind of experience. And
Hmm.
so I'm not ever like super stressed or anything
Yeah.
or it's like too many people and super rowdy and
Mm,
like yeah, so I think that's what's the good thing about it is that like we can sit down, chill, chat, maybe like get a coffee, sit down, like so I think that's what's really good about it is that it's very laid back. And I think my personal like experience like musically, it's actually changed a lot because of Record Club. I think like I've taken to studying music and artists more seriously. Um, and yeah, the introduction of Eve's Tumor was
mm,
really big for me. I think that was the start where I was like, oh, like, like this discography of, like all this like music that I've never listened to is actually so like vastly interesting. And I'm willing to be a lot more experimental than I was before. Um, so yeah, I really love Use Tumor. I found that through Record Club. I think Record Club is great if you're a music fanatic, but you don't know how to play any instruments, you don't know anything about the technical side, you
yeah,
just
like
love
me.
listening
Yeah.
and you love like the story and concept that like artists can bring. And a lot of like social, political, economic critiques because this is a kind of art where you verbatim call out things that are happening directly in the world and like it's also good to look back on that through history and like see what was going on and see like the eras of music like like even like like the kind of like the 80s and the use of like psychedelics in music and how that affected like the cultural zeitgeist as well. It's such a robust way of like art. In that it really like you are directly speaking to people in many ways.
Mhm. What do you think about how we're decorating the room? Like what's the meaning of that? Like putting all the album art on the wall and kind of doing it as a working together, like to decorate the room.
Mm-mm-mm. I think I like the way the room is decorated because it's kind of like a menu
Hmm.
and like flipping through records can take a really long time
Hmm.
to find something that you like. So looking at on the wall and being like, I know I like this album, let me go find it. And then also like having other people help you look for it as well is like a really nice thing, to introduce like someone new or just like, like while you're flipping through albums to talk about other music
Mm.
um, is really nice. So like, you'll look for maybe Life of Pablo and you're looking for Life of Pablo, but then you come across like uh the Michael Jackson album that we have and be like, "Oh, can we put this on afterwards?" So um it's nice and like we're all adults so like, everybody's like it's good to take turns and like be like oh let's put on your album next. So I really like that. I like that we use all the posters in the albums. I think it's really fun. Obvious there's still I like that there's like I like that it's not pristine in there. There's a lot of like random cabinets in there and a whiteboard
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like a lumpy sofa
Hmm.
um and a fridge that smells awful.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna try
Um
to throw that away too.
yeah, we should. We absolutely should throw
Yeah.
that
I taped it.
away.
I've taped it shut at least. So
Um and like just random cabinets. There's like a
Mm.
cabinet in there and I looked in the drawer and there's just a bunch of like an ungodly amount of like magnets.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah.
just so random, but like
Yeah.
I like it because it feels student built like
Mhm.
um and in my high school was very very student led to the point where our student council had so much power. Um, and coming from there to SFC, like students don't really have a say in very much. And I don't think for university, having that kind of hands-off experience is kind of nice. Personally, like that's I think maybe some people would like a more hands-on experience, but like it's nice to have a little bit of governance somewhere. And so I think like, you know, we can come in and like tell you that we want this poster here and like you'll consider it and like we all kind of get there and like yeah, decorate it together. And so and it feels like a group effort. It's also nice because it's kind of an allegory for like past generations of SSC students, like, and I hope that I hope that record club like continues so that like, we will have photos of what it looked like back in the day
Hmm.
and like other more incoming students will have like a different space for themselves. So I think that's a really like kind of like a beautiful way to think about it in the long term.
Hmm. Yeah, like I would love if, like 15 years from now you come back and visit and I'm just about to retire, I guess. And you like see something that you remember putting on the wall.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Hmm. Hmm. And just last week when there was some like freshman orientation thing going on, I took a bunch of them in there and like showed them it for the
Oh, that's
first
so
time.
fun.
Yeah. And like you get to like some students, there's like certain students it doesn't really resonate with, but then there's
Mhm.
you could see the ones that do, like
Yeah.
that look at like, what goes on here, and
Hmm.
yeah, like it immediately like hits certain people. So
Yeah.
I like to see that.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that you have to really like involve yourself with music if you like and most people I think do. I think most people have music that they really, really love, or they just generally love music in general. But there are more casual listeners that are just fine with like streaming whatever is on YouTube or on Spotify. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Record Club is definitely for people who kind of live in music. You wake up in the morning, you put something on, and then, yeah.
Hmm. Okay, let's see. Well, on that note, should we move forward to talking about one of your favorite albums?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we can. Um, so Preacher's Daughter, uh,
I'll put up
by
the album.
an
I'll put up
artist.
the album cover.
Oh yeah, お願いします.
Ta-da. Is it full screen? Darn. My Zoom skills are kind of rusty.
That's fine.
Happily that I no longer teach on Zoom.
Hmm.
Yeah. Does that look full screen to you?
It seems like you've opened up the speaker's notes.
Okay, okay. I'll sort this out. Ah, jeez. Um, well, in the meantime,
Yeah.
once I successfully get this up, we are going to talk about a 2022 album.
Hmm.
Okay, that Natasha has a special connection to. Wait, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. Da-da. This is what I was looking for. Boom. That's full, right?
Yes,
Oh,
that
there
is.
you go. Okay, so this
Yeah,
is the album cover,
this is the album cover.
and we're talking about Ethel Cain, Preacher's Daughter,
Mhm.
released in 2022. Okay,
Mhm.
and so why? And the album cover that like it does actually look blurry, right? So it's not that this is a bad, I chose a bad image. On the album, the actual artwork looks purposely blurry.
Yeah.
Okay. So why do you want to talk about this record?
I think this record is particularly unique in the way that it was released quite recently, but it's got this like kind of like manic touch to it that like um it's a concept album, which I think is pretty rare these days, is to have like a fully fleshed story within an album because streaming has made it so that we need like popular singles and hits. Um, and but that also means that people aren't listening to full albums these days. They're usually listening to stuff that comes up on their like shuffle playlists. Um, and so to be as bold as to create an album basically like um where people can't get the full story through just one song
Mm,
is I think really really bold for a pretty relatively new artist.
hmm
Ethel Cain has before the album had one other album that did like decently well, but I think this album really like kind of I wouldn't say like she's not really in the mainstream, but she does have kind of like an infamy through this album. I saw a lot of good like it's gotten a lot of good critical acclaim, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
So what was your entry point? Like how did you first hear of her?
Right. So I followed this kind of internet comedian, I would say. Um her this American woman who like has this like podcast, and I really like the way she talked about her music was so interesting. I'd never heard anyone talk about like music like that. And so I went to go listen to the album and I didn't understand it. Um, and to be honest, like there are songs in there that are very long.
Mm.
Um, I think the longest song is like 6 minutes, maybe
No, look at
longer. No, it's
Thoroughfare is 9.5 minutes. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a long album and it's something that you have to sink your teeth into to understand. And so for someone who was much more of a casual listener before, I like it completely went over my head. I the only song that I really like knew and like listened to was American Teenager, which like um but like none of the other songs sound like that on the track. Like that's a very pop like esque
Mm.
song.
Yeah.
Which like it like such so intensely juxtaposes everything else on the album, which I think is interesting that she did that as well.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I didn't understand it. And then I think um around the time I went into record club, I kind of like tried again. Um, and I didn't listen through to it fully through. I listened to the track, I think Gibson Girl, and then I listened to the track Potsam I can't pronounce this.
Oh wait, yeah, I looked it up.
Maya.
So it's actually pronounced Tulu somehow Tulu Maya.
Okay, Tulumaya.
Yeah.
So those two tracks I listened to back to back.
Tulumia maybe. I think it's Tulumia.
Tulumia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I listened to those two back to back, and I like those are still like my two favorite songs from this album.
Hmm.
Some of my favorite songs like ever. Um, and it's so haunting. Her music just in general. It's got such intense connotations to it. And once I listened to those two tracks, because I think those are probably the two scariest tracks
Hmm.
um off the off the album. It was easier to listen to everything fully through. Um, and I finally got kind of like the picture and the story of what's going on in this like kind of like really sad tale of like womanhood. Um, and it felt really groundbreaking almost.
Hmm.
I felt very proud of myself in that moment for being able to like understand some of what I was listening to. Because also there are a lot of like lyrics that you have to go out of your way to like either listen to multiple times to like understand or to go and like research yourself. Um, so yeah, this is definitely an album that's for like people who really want to like be kind of engulfed in the culture of this music.
Hmm. So Talumia, that's the one, the track where she's screaming, right? Stop, stop, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
And
really kind of,
yeah, so well, the whole concept of this album is following three generations of women. In and the setting is I believe the Midwest in America. Um, and um kind of uh the journey of these women through like coping through intergenerational trauma.
hmm
And we kind of start off in this like we start off with Family Tree, which is kind of like almost like the introduction, like foreshadowing to what happens in the story. And then we get American Teenager, which is kind of like it's this very like cool like bedroom pop like song that initially doesn't give you the full like it doesn't um like give you the full story of like what happens in the story. It kind of it really does like juxtapose everything else. um it's so like it's not exactly like positive either, but it kind of glamorizes this tale of a Midwestern teenager.
hmm.
um and as we see throughout like the story, like it doesn't look good for like this character for very much longer.
Hmm.
um yeah, so I think this album really talks about like religious guilt,
hmm
or
Yeah.
like yeah, like very intensely. And like
Hmm.
we have a character, like I think they have names actually, but it's kind of like follows this character that runs away from a very religious family, with and like finds a boy while she's running away. And then I believe that initial boy either gets murdered or arrested, and then she finds herself in a really tough position, and continues to like kind of like travel through the Midwest. And it really follows her through this. It's like what Ethel Cain, like the artist, described as like it's an epic.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's a really like refreshing, even though like um epics find like myself associating it with classical literature. It's fine to like it's nice to find something that's an epic for our my current generation.
Hmm.
um and like it's something that like isn't completely unrealistic of like of a girl running away from home in the Midwest, um and like falling into multiple like abusive relationships, finding herself in like really rough positions where she has to like sell herself to make money, and like inevitably being like a martyr in the end.
Mm,
um it's just heartbreaking and soul wrenching, and the way that the album kind of sums it up in like Strangers is really interesting because it kind of like is um like we have to move on in a way. Yeah.
hmm. Um, well, I'm sure I've asked you before, but have you?
Mm.
I know you lived in the UK for a while, right?
Yeah.
But did you ever live in America?
No, I've never lived in America.
Okay. See, it's weird because I feel like I think of you as an American more than a like you don't have a British accent, right? I mean, at
No,
all.
I went to an American school and it was very religious,
Hmm.
and there were a lot of people from the Midwest
Okay.
there.
Ah.
Um so and from the South.
Oh.
So
Okay. Uh-huh.
yeah, the heavy like what I would say is like Americana Christianity,
Hmm.
where um you dress up nice for church on a Sunday and you get to get with your family, and that like tradition was I was very exposed to. I think it's very actually different from like religion, or like how, like religion functions in other places. I like a lot of people, like a lot of religious people in the UK, um, they do their like Bible study in the pub.
Hmm.
Um, and like that's not like a radical thing. That's like pretty standard, but I think, like uh American Christianity focused heavily on purity and cleanliness, and I think, to be honest, whiteness,
Hmm.
like what I've experienced uh from American Christianity. At least what the sect that I was kind of exposed to.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um I think, yeah.
Hmm. And that was your school in Japan you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that was my school in Japan.
Hmm.
It was a international school, very small school. Um it was an interesting place, to say the least. I had a lot of criticism about how the school functioned. But I also have a lot of love for the very kind people that were there. Um, and I think that uh, I had some amazing, grateful, I'm super grateful for a lot of the teachers that were there who supported me, and especially with my like learning disability, very patient. Uh, But yeah, I think the faculty I wasn't particularly impressed with,
Hmm.
which is why I moved to the UK. And my American school is probably why I don't have a British accent.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Hmm. So do you think that background helped you connect with this album?
Yeah, incredibly so, because I obviously didn't have a first-hand experience in the Midwest, but I knew people who grew up in the Midwest or grew up in the South with that kind of um like nuclear American family, you know, where like everybody in the neighborhood knows each other and everybody goes to church, and like um everybody practices, like chastity and whatnot. Like that was very much like, and so it kind of felt like I was looking into the world of people that I knew from there.
Hmm.
Um, it was very, very interesting. Yeah. Because a lot of the references and kind of the um like the cadence in which like some of the religious notes and like scripture that is in Ethel Kane, it's just like not just like a preacher's daughter, but in other music as well. Like I know, I've heard it before, and they're very specific scripture that like I think my like my school was evangelist, but like it's those like verses that like evangelists typically cherry pick
Hmm.
and like recite and regurgitate over and over and over again. So it was interesting to see it in a different kind of like concept of this like eerie,
Hmm.
haunting, like kind of critique almost on like the religious culture around like the Midwest and also just like American religion in general. It's so interesting. I think America has perfectly capitalized on religion.
Hmm. What do you mean?
I think by like creating a archetype of what a good Christian should be, you can therefore sell that archetype.
Hmm.
It's so interesting. And you also see these celebrities who have their own churches and they're like tax havens.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because I'm not American, but I grew up with surrounded by so much American culture, and but also growing up in Japan, and then also like having my English side. It's like America's really good at selling things
Hmm.
and selling an idea of something,
Hmm. Hmm.
a concept, a person to you that you could be,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And they've done it so well with so many different religions, even like sects of religions, like Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, like, and at the top of the food chain, it's these like honestly like sociopathic, like power hungry people who, like their church gives them donations to live their gorgeous, luxurious life in their beach house in Miami. And
Hmm.
it's like, what is this? It's such a fascinating concept. Um, and I like the way that Ethel kind of takes it and be like, and kind of regurgitate it in a way where it's like, um, look at the women at kind of like the bottom of the food chain in these places, and like tell me if we've really reached the idealistic like kind of archetype of religion that if God forgives, like can he forgive this character who died a martyr and who died selling herself at the end of the day, and they talk a lot about in like, because I believe that it's also like evangelism in this Preacher's Daughter album that like Ethel Kane speaks about. And evangelism, you or evangelical Christianity, they talk a lot about how as long as you believe in Jesus as your savior, you can go to heaven. So that's the only barrier of entry, really, really. But then, so that's how you get introduced to the religion, right? They go, unconditional love. There's
Hmm.
unconditional love right here if you believe. But once there's the barrier of entry, they go, well, you should be acting like this, really. Like as a good because you're getting unconditional love. Listen, you're getting this vast and beautiful afterlife where you can spend the rest of your days where like not even days, like concept of time doesn't even exist, right? You can spend your the rest of like existing with the people that you love, things that you love, unimaginable riches, right? And so like, well, why don't you just act like this for a little bit? And then
Mm,
they go, well, you can't be gay,
mm,
you know? And then like, so really there's more to it than just believing in Jesus, but they love to like, you know, make it so that it seems like that's the only thing.
mm,
And that's how you get introduced to the religion. And growing up with that is really interesting because when you're a kid, you think, well, unconditional love. That's awesome. That's great. Like it's most of the time. And then once you get older, you get hit with these barriers and you're like, oh, well, you have to be like this and you have to be like this and you have to fit this archetype. And then it starts becoming like kind of, and then you feel guilt. Religious guilt is insane. And I still like, in a way, I've transferred that guilt from like intense religion. I'm not religious anymore, but like that intense religion from guilt, like religious guilt to like ethical guilt.
mm.
So now I read I read a lot of philosophy books and I read a lot of books on ethics, like Dostoevsky and like um Albert Camus. And yeah, it's something that's very much, I think, instilled in children who grow up with that um background. So I there's a many ways I sympathize really intensely with Ethel Kane's character.
Mm.
Because they really like in religious schools, I think they really like emphasize that even if your family isn't that religious.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, I feel like you talk about it a lot. You talk about your school a lot. Like even
Mm.
when we're not talking about Ethel Kane,
Yeah.
like you think about it and talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a fascinating concept in a way. Like I can look at it now as kind of an outsider and be like, what like a like odd like community, you know?
Mm.
It's so like very strange to be in. And to like kind of like get out of and then look at it retrospectively, be like, oh, what like that's not normal. And so many of that was strange. Like, why was I waking up at like, like 7 a.m. and going to school? And the first thing I see is like basic like depictions of torture. Like, I think like a lot of Christian kids are exposed to gore
Right.
because there's so much of it in the Bible.
Hmm.
Like there's so much rape and pillaging and torture in the Bible. And so I was like, I would not let my kids read the Bible if I like, it's and the fact that those concepts didn't like, like uh well the adults around me presented it as like as if it were normal. And I'm sure that for them it was. They grew up with that.
Hmm.
And so they don't think it's, you know, like ethically or morally erroneous to present that to another child, right? Because well, they were doing it too. But when I think about it retrospectively, I'm like, that is so odd.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think one of the things that I thought was interesting in Ethel Kane's album that I drew a lot of parallels from is in evangelical Christianity, they tell you that the word is for sinners, right? So in the New Testament, in the gospel, um, Jesus really goes around like sharing his love with society's like rejects. He doesn't go around praising the people who have lived perfect Christian lives. He goes out of his way to talk to the lame and the poor, the leopards, and like um the people that have been rejected by society. And a lot of these people and the people that like mentioned a lot were prostitutes.
Hmm.
So
Mary Magdalene.
yeah.
Hmm.
Um and she's kind of this like she's a really interesting case as well of kind of um like how like the word is for sinners, and to have her kind of I wonder if Ethel Kane really drew a lot of like inspiration from her to her character. That
Hmm.
she does love like this woman who loves God, this woman who wishes to be like chaste, and like this woman who wishes to be like kind of this, you know, I don't know, good Christian woman, but out of necessity having to like go into like, like um these industries that are frowned upon. I think it was a really interesting to look at. And I'd have to like deep dive a bit more. There's so much to unpack in this album as
Hmm.
well, which is what makes it so exciting. So I'm coming from a big like religious point of view, but I
Hmm.
think there's also like a lot of like um just like overall like feminist perspectives that you could take from this. A lot of like philosophical ways, psychological ways that we could like dissect this. And Ethel has thought this through, right? She wants you to unravel things one at a time. And there's some things that like I think she's put in the album that, like a lot of people may have not noticed yet. And I
Hmm.
think that's what makes it interesting is because this community of people who like her music, who want to unravel these like little bits of like information can come together and like really dissect
Hmm.
what's going on here.
So people mentioned somewhere in the story there's a scene of cannibalism on the album. Do
Oh
you?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
that's
I don't know. Maybe I didn't catch that. Where does that happen?
so right. That's after Gibson Girl and
Me.
so yeah, told me was it Tom
Yeah, I wrote down Talumia.
Ptolemy. So
Hmm.
Ptolemy is the part where our main character actually gets cannibalized
Okay.
by her abusive boyfriend,
Hmm.
um whose name is August. And so August Underground is him burying her.
Okay.
Or kind of I think August Underground is also him like cannibalizing her. So she gets murdered in Ptolemea and then um gets cannibalized in August Underground. Which is why we hear the like many layers of uh like of her screaming
Hmm.
and like asking August to stop in um in Ptolemea. And you can hear this kind of like humming voice. Um, I love, let me just pull up the introduction to Ptolemea because um it's a Bible verse that I vividly remember from my childhood. And when I heard this like humming voice like talking,
Hmm.
in the introduction, I like it really like ignited a memory in me.
Hmm.
And
How about I'll pause for a sec while you
yeah,
get that ready. Ba, ba, ba. Okay. Yeah. We're
yeah,
recording again. Yes.
yeah. So I think I might have gotten one of the characters wrong actually, their name.
Hmm.
But this is like a very like iconic Bible verse.
Hmm.
Um, I believe it's like not Jesus, but like God who says it.
Hmm. I followed you in. I was with you there. I invited you in twice. I did. You
Yeah,
love blood too much, but not like I do. Not like I do.
yeah.
Mm.
So, I can't remember what chapter of the Bible this is in.
Hmm.
Um, but it was like a big like kind of like a flashback to my like kind of Christian school days where we used to like have to learn Bible verses every week and we'd have to memorize them. And I remember memorizing this one and how truly eerie it sounds in that kind of like low toned voice. And so this is our like perpetrator really like talking to our um our main character before he like cannibalizes her.
Mm.
Um and he like repeats these words to her before he does. Um and it's such like in a way it's a horrible scene. Like it's brutal and it's so scary and yet like um it's I think it's so beautiful in a way. Like where I think Ethel Kane depicts like true martyrdom. Um and like he says again, you poor thing, sweet morning lamb, there's nothing you can do. It's already been done. So like sweet morning lamb, Jesus is described as a lamb of sacrifice in um in evangelical Christianity. Um and he's depicted that way in many like Renaissance art and like religious art as well. He's depicted as a lamb. So it's kind of interesting to draw there as well. Um but yeah, it is like in many ways I I kind of love the references in this song and also like the way that it's like layered through. So like if you listen to it just by itself, you wouldn't really know that she's being cannibalized,
Hmm.
that she's being like kind of brutally murdered.
Hmm.
Um and you'd have to go and look it up. But just as a song itself, the layering of her like scared voice on top of this like humming deep like murmuring of like basically like religious like threats, you know, and
Mm.
it's it's really just like so well written and it's one of those songs where I can't do anything while listening to it.
Mm.
I have to stop, I have to listen to it. Like and just have let it have its glory. Like this is yeah, this I to be honest, I think people should just listen to the song because I describe it the way it feels.
Mm.
It truly is like bone chilling. It's one of those songs that really give you goosebumps when you listen to it.
Mm.
And it feels like it could be in like a horror movie or something.
Mm.
But to be honest, if it was, I don't think like a lot of music I that Ethel Kane makes, I think could really fit well for a very like psychological thriller kind of horror movie,
Hmm.
but I feel like it wouldn't do the music justice because like the music by itself is already so terrifying
Mm.
in
Hmm.
many ways. So, yeah, it's like beautiful and so like scary.
So how does the fact that she's transgender um, affect
Mhm.
your appreciation or understanding of the album,
I think
or does it?
I don't think it does. I think that like her fans don't care, and I think like it's not like a massive like focal point in her music.
Hmm.
Um like it could it there it's speculated that like some of her characters might also be trans. She doesn't come out right and say it because that's not what's important here,
Hmm.
really. We're talking about religious guilt. We're talking about womanhood. We're talking about, our forgiveness towards like abusive, manipulative men. And so like I think that like I can fully appreciate her for who she is, but that's not like the focal point of her music, and I wouldn't want it to be unless she took it in that direction.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I don't think her fans really care if she is or if she isn't. We
Hmm.
just love the music.
Hmm. But when you described her as bold, like to me, it almost gives it another layer of boldness
Mm,
to be who she is, coming from the South, like growing up in this environment. Yeah.
mm. I think yes. In many ways, I think she draws a lot of inspiration from the conservatism that exists in um the South, but I think she doesn't just talk about how like being queer or being trans has affected her in the music. It's more about how she builds these characters and like because I think in many ways um the fear of gender nonconformity or the fear of trans people that has been like growing rapidly in the US or the homophobia that has been growing rapidly in the US is um a lot of times rooted in like the misogyny that we have for women. It's that we fear womanhood and we fear femininity and we the anti and so like a lot of the reasons of like a lot of like the reasons why people are homophobic are also the reasons why they're misogynist. They don't want to see weak men. They don't want to see, like men want to conform to what society has like set out for them. There's also like tons of other layers to this as well. Just speaking on like kind of like one aspect of it, but like I think she really dives into like the struggle of womanhood in the South, whether that be a trans woman or not. And I think that her experience must have shaped this as well, you know?
Hmm. I think even in American Teenager, which is the poppiest song on the album,
Yeah.
there are some rather controversial or brave that line about the boy who came home in a box, right?
Mm,
But he wanted to go, so maybe it was his fault, right? So
yeah.
usually when people criticize war, they criticize the government or whatever, but she's basically at least suggesting that this boy who went to war and was killed, it was
Mm,
his fault for wanting to go. I mean, that's
Right.
just kind of dropped in the middle of a really like kind of like poppy song. Like it's
Yeah.
just an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, I didn't understand that lyric at first, and so I had to like look it up. Um, I think that I wonder if she's not actually criticizing the people that go, but she's criticizing the society that's become grown ambivalent to them going and dying.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That we've made it kind of like uh like not a common thing, but like we've grown apathetic to these men that have to like feel like they have to go or have like in America particularly like I think a lot of people in the military come from lower class families who basically having like a stable income means that they have to go into these like pretty like risky dangerous jobs.
Mm. And there's like a pride in it, right? Like their father did it and their grandfather did it, right? So it's
Yeah, that is.
mm.
And um I think in many like I think she's more critiquing the nationalistic perspective of going to the military rather than like the actual people that go to the military because there's
Mhm.
lots of reasons why you would go into the military and I think you know the way that um kind of the American form of masculinity has really like leaned on like its military for so many years like I think speaks to how like big of a critique this is honestly
Mhm.
um yeah and yeah there are many reasons why like people go into military. I mean the American military like gives so many good benefits. It's kind of hard to say no. Like uh pay for college education is something that like people so want, you know?
Mm.
And yeah, like and for I think for a lot of people they don't necessarily actually go into the front lines, right?
Mm.
They work on bases like they do here in Japan. They like do a lot more technical stuff. But there are people who do end up like in war essentially. And yeah, is it okay to prey on these like vulnerable individuals that don't have other options
Mm.
but want an education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's another part of that song too, I think, where she points out it's the rich politicians who, you know, get America involved in the wars and then kind of the
Hmm.
poor families' sons that have to go
Yeah.
pay the price, right?
Yeah. It's not yeah, these rich politicians are never sent their own kids.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um it's I think a lot of it this album that I haven't touched on that as much is a big critique on American culture.
Mm.
Um, and it's kind of like glorification of dying in martyrdom.
What
And a
um
hero.
what to you is the significance of her wearing a cheerleader uniform in the American Teenager video?
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, I like I do that video is really interesting because it feels like kind of perfect for the song and also the album. Um, that cheerleader outfit I heavily associate with like American culture
Hmm.
and how like in many ways um like youth is looked at as sexy. Um and like chastity is also looked at as like sexy. I think it's really like, and that also delves into um like Christian culture as well, I think. But it's just like because American Teenager, the song, and cheerleading outfits as well, like are generally associated with high school and adolescent like girls. Um, and I think that like that cheerleading outfit kind of like speaks to how like this like growing up in a society that promotes being chaste, but also like heavily sexualizes young girls is such like a intense juxtaposition. It's contra like it's living in a contradiction, right?
Mm.
Like, and I think a lot of American culture is that like living in a contradiction. Um, or Christian culture as well.
Do you think is she mocking convention? Is there something mean-spirited in what she's doing?
I don't think there's any, I don't think there's parts of Ethel Cain's references where she's actually mocking anything. Like, I don't think she's being trying to poke fun at anything. I think she's presenting you with an idea or with a concept and asking you like um like kind of like asking you like have you ever thought about this? Do you think about this? Like
Hmm.
and like questioning, like questioning it, and then like presenting that in front of you. But I don't think she's mocking anything.
Hmm.
She might be.
Hmm.
I've never,
I mean, I don't necessarily think so.
yeah,
It's just, huh. That video is yeah, dynamic, I think.
yeah, it is.
Hmm. And I like that it's kind of made to look like it's like an old VHS tape, kind of like it has like a 90s vibe to it.
Yeah, it kind of like it feels like it was made by a high schooler in
Hmm.
a way,
Hmm.
in like the Midwest.
Hmm.
And I think that's what's really important in this album is that you see this character grow as well. Like you see her become an adult, but she still kind of hangs on to those childish like ideas of like being saved.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Let's see. Shall we wrap up? Is there
Yeah.
something you want to say in closing or
I talked a lot, I critiqued a lot of like American religion and culture. I hope that no American is particularly offended by
Hmm.
that. It was purely like for the album analysis, and from my own experience. But Americans are okay.
Wait, can you say that again?
Americans are okay.
They're okay. Yeah. But I mean, like you're fascinated with the culture, so I mean, yeah,
I think
you should be
I
thinking
am
of those parts.
because it's I mean America influences like the rest of the world so like intensely in politics, society, culture, whatnot. And like because it's so saturated, like culture is saturated there, we get to see this beautiful like um expression of art. Um so I think a lot of American artists really define certain eras and genres of music. Um and the way they critique their like government or the way they critique society really like it can also show up in different contexts as well, right? It doesn't just have to be about America. Like I think um Rage Against the Machine also like very directly critiques America and its capitalistic society and tendencies. But that can be translated towards many, many other different like nations. Um, and so like I think uh like American culture is super, super interesting in the way that like, it does like what I said before, it kind of lives in a contradiction.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, maybe that's a good note to end on. What do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's beautiful analysis of the album, Natasha. Thank you.
thank you. I might have gotten some things wrong.
Well, but then, people could just listen to the record.
Yeah, people could. I hope they do.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll stop the recording. We can
All
chat a
right.
bit more, but I'll stop the recording. So I will say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching episode 12 of SFC Record Club vlog. Okay. Natasha, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
お疲れ様でした.
Some of this.
Okay, let me stop.